evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our Frankly Speaking debate this evening on Black tax and outmoded social model. My name is Sisi Sitole. I am pleased to be your moderator for this evening. I was educated in Zimbabwe and currently live in the United States, where I work as an early childhood instructional coach. I'm a staunch advocate for equity in education, and as such, I'm working on bringing innovative models of early childhood development to our most under-resourced children and communities. Frankly Speaking is the brainchild of Father Isaac Fernandez of the Jesuit Southern African province. Frankly Speaking explores different topics with the express purpose of looking at the intersection of faith and contemporary life. Today, of course, we will be discussing a highly charged topic, Black tax, an outmoded social model. Our objective for this debate tonight is to make sure that everyone who joins and who hears is able to walk away with something to help move us forward to the future, whether an idea or steps of action. We really want to engage in an intellectual, constructive debate toward that end. We're hoping to discuss different considerations around Black tax, such as where did the term Black tax even come from? Like, where are those connotations from? We will also hopefully begin to explore whether Black tax is a burden on those who are giving, or if it's an investment. Simply put, Black tax means someone taking their financial earnings and supporting their family members, either immediate family or extended family. So we are looking forward to a robust and lively discussion around this topic. Temperatures are usually raised when we discuss Black tax, but again, we're hoping to move beyond that and look at workable solutions and actions for a way forward. I am joined by two very distinguished guests. I am pleased to welcome Mr. Gabriel Chipara, who will be giving his thoughts for the motion. And Mr. Chipara is a financial wellness consultant and also an alumnus of Ernst & Young. Giving thoughts against the motion is Dr. Baba Buntu. Dr. Buntu is an activist scholar who studies decolonization of African masculinity. So we are pleased to welcome both gentlemen. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you, Tissy, and good evening, everyone.
And welcome to Dr. Buntu. So the format of our debate is going to be in the Lincoln-Douglas format. Just for a bit of background, the Lincoln-Douglas debates were a series of historical debates between Abraham Lincoln, who was a Republican in the United States, and Stephen Douglas, who was a Democrat. And they were debating in order to try and get control of the Illinois General Assembly for their respective parties. Our debate is going to be a modified version, and I will very briefly let you know what it's going to look like. Again, for the motion is Mr. Chipara. So Mr. Chipara will have 7 minutes to share his thoughts on why he thinks that Black tax is an outmoded social model. Dr. Buntu will then have 4 minutes to clarify the points that he has heard from Mr. Chipara. Dr. Buntu will then have his own 7 minutes to share his thoughts of why he's against the notion that Black tax is an outmoded social model, at which point Mr. Chipara will then have 4 minutes to clarify what he has heard from Dr. Buntu. From there, we will have a 2-minute break so both gentlemen can collect their thoughts and provide personal summations. During that 2 minutes, I will give a bit of guidance for audience participation. After that 2 minutes is done, both of our speakers will each have 3 minutes to give their personal summations both on their original thoughts and anything that they feel needs to be integrated based on what they heard from each other. So we are looking forward to this debate. Again, welcome to my guests. Welcome to all of you watching from wherever you're watching from in different time zones. Without further ado, let's get started. Mr. Chipara, we will start with you. Please share your thoughts on why you are for the motion. You will have 7 minutes, and I will give you a 1-minute warning.
Right.
So whenever you are ready, I'll start the timer.
Thank you. I'm ready now. We can start.
Great.
Right. Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Madam Moderator, for this opportunity to share my thoughts on this very contentious topic. Given my background as a former accountant and as someone who's been talking about financial literacy, financial education, as well as financial freedom here on the continent of Africa, it gives me pleasure to be for the motion, which says that this issue of black tax, however we're going to define it, is outmoded in terms of it being a social model, number one. Number two, I'm going to also touch on the fact that, yes, I am a beneficiary of the black tax system. I grew up in a poor family. I grew up in Zim. Yes, I may have traveled, but ordinarily, I'm a Zimbabwean based in Zimbabwe. So I am very much aware of how black tax has assisted me as a Zimbabwean, but at the same time, I'm also aware of what it feels like to be the one now paying the black tax. Meaning, as a beneficiary, yes, it was good to enjoy the benefits of it, but going forward, let's start with what my understanding of the term black tax is. Yes, as an accountant, like I said, tax means something that has to be paid at a certain rate, and the amount that's supposed to be paid is determined by someone else, not the payer. And the frequency is also determined by someone else, not the payer. So if I am to go by the strict definition of a tax, it means there's an element of unwillingness that is attached to the payment of sustenance of one's family, whether it's payment to the parents, to siblings, nieces, nephews. The point still remains that person who may be the only person within the big family who's able to pay something towards how a family can be looked after, that means to that person it's a tax. Now, coming from the angle of somebody who talks about financial literacy and financial education, given that in Africa, number one, we've got a debunked pension system. Number two, we have other taxes that Black people are already paying, whether it's premiums because of your skin color or premiums because of your background. For today, I'll leave that out. But in terms of how I feel about the practice and its relevance going forward, here's the thing. Not as a beneficiary, how do you make sure that, one, you are paying the Black tax, but at the same time, as a young professional or a soon-to-be an adult professional or someone's about to get married, how do you ensure that you balance, one, what your responsibilities are as a person, particularly say you move out of the city that you grew up in and you go and work in maybe in Harare and you grew up in Bulawayo. I'm using Harare as Zimbabwean cities here. It means you've got your own bills. You've moved out of your parents' house. Number two, why is it that siblings who are able-bodied, just like you, who are looked after by the same parents as that professional, expect you as the person who supposedly on paper is making more money than anyone else in the family? Why should they be looked after by you, even if there's nothing special that you may have received as one of those 5, 6, or 7 siblings? Number three, when it comes to assisting, it should not be mandatory on the part of the pair. So going forward, there should be, in other words, we are now moving away from the usual black tax system as I grew up knowing it, as somebody who benefited from it. Going forward, number one, the person who's supposed to pay or who's expected to pay should, one, let the other people know that they may pay or they may not be able to pay, not anyone expecting them to pay mandatorily on time, every time, whenever that person gets paid a salary. Number two, after having said that you don't expect people to demand money from you, you should also educate whoever it is expected to get something from you to understand that on their part, and at some point, they need to learn how to make their own money, regardless of their current situation. Meaning, I'm agreeable to the point that you teach or help somebody learn how to fish, show them a fishing pond, make sure that they actually catch some fish, not eat all the fish that they've caught, and let them go on their own, as opposed to that person expecting fish from the black taxpayer every month, month end, a certain amount without fail. The only exception to my argument is parents. Why? They are the only person, in my view.
1 minute, Mr. Chipara. Thank you.
Okay. Is my time up?
1 minute left.
Okay. So the only exception to my argument is parents. Anyone else, be they my siblings, my in-laws, my nephews, my nieces, should not, going forward, expect any form of black tax from a professional like myself who has worked hard to make sure that I get to a stage where I'm financially free. Now, my last point, it always reminds me of the example I always give in my seminars. When I talk about a person, a relative, not even my niece or nephew, maybe my dad's sister's son or cousin in this instance, which is up at my house, no notice, and he stays at my house for 6 months without even asking me how that will affect my budget. And so in that sense, going forward, this issue of the old model of back tax needs to be removed because, in my view, it's outmoded, given today's social model and also today's financial social pressures. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chipara. We appreciate that. We appreciate hearing your thoughts. Dr. Buntu, you will have 4 minutes.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Buntu, you will have 4 minutes to now clarify what you heard from Mr. Chipara. And ready when you are.
Okay. I thought I was going to ask Chipara to clarify what I would like him to expand on. Those were the points that I had prepared. But a very good evening to everyone, and good evening to all the viewers, the host, and also Mr. Chipara. It's great to hear your points. I think one point that came up for me is around the element of unwillingness, which is implied when we talk about tax or something that is kind of enforced. In your view, I wanted you to say something about where do you think the line goes between self-preservation, which would be a goal in a young person's life, and selfishness. Could there be that there are times you need to step out and you need to look at what are the dynamics that other families members are not able to achieve what they want? And another point around the question of expectations. And I understand in your view you said that it actually should only be parents who should have expectations around being empowered or being given back to. But should we assume that siblings and other family members don't have because they're not trying? Meaning, for instance, when we say as a young person, you should be able to use what you have worked hard for. Are we then not also implying that others have not worked hard and that when you work hard, you actually get, which is not our experience as Black people. That's the second point. And the third point was culturally, how should young people educate their elders? When you talk about financial literacy, when you talk about the importance to understand economics, first, we are implying that elders may not understand. And secondly, culturally, we are not so used to young people sitting elders down to educate them. How would you suggest that that could happen? Those were some of the notions that came up for me. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for those thoughts, Dr. Buntu. We will keep them in mind. I'm sure Mr. Chipara is also keeping those in mind. Dr. Buntu, we are now going to give you 7 minutes to share your thoughts against the motion that Black tax is an outmoded social model. So whenever you are ready, I will second.
Again, thank you so much. I wanted to present my points a little bit differently, and this is how I'll do it. So I want to declare that I love African culture, not because I have to, but I can't stop, even if I want to. So I'm saying that because when I study the ancient civilizations of Kemet, Nok, Mutapa, Mapungubwe, the empires of Oyo, Wasulu, Marawi, Kitara, Wanga, when I look at the king and queendoms of Jarin, Nagash, Bazin, Jima, Kerma, Numidia, and the many other civilizations that most of us have never even heard of, I realized that I actually stand on the shoulders of millions of ancestors whose culture was actually built on equitable wealth, political stability, and collective power, and the pursuit thereof. And that at the center of this majestic civilization sits a particular understanding of the African family as the epicenter of power. Power of learning, power of being, power of building. But I also realized that there is no job on this planet where I'm expected to, where I will benefit from, or where it is safe to truly carry this knowledge. The more I do, the more I become a threat in a world that designed me as a perpetual outcast. The task of an African professional is to pretend that Africa never was advanced, had wealth, or understood power. And that's the silent contract for my existence and survival, is that I learn not to speak about the colonial wounds that bleed within my being every single day. And it is within that background that I read the motion for tonight's debate, and I shake my head a bit because I have a huge problem with what the wording and maybe what is implied within it as well. If we break it down, so we start with the word Black, which some will say is a contentious word, but I think it speaks in this context to Blackness being a burden. And I agree that that's the experience we have, that it's cumbersome, it's stressful to carry Blackness in this world. But it's also something that I dearly love. It's something that I hold at its highest level. We talk about tax, which, as my co-speaker was also saying, it's something that is imposed. But is it really family that is imposed there? Is my family the problem? Is not the problem outside of my family? I wouldn't say that the family is the tax authority. I think it's somebody further out. When we talk about outmoded, we say that we mean old-fashioned, and we refer to something that may have been in place, but that we now should oust. But I could think of a number of things that are now mispracticed that I think, if we understand and if we practice it right, are very important to hold on to. Ilobolo, intlaulo, naming ceremonies, marriage rituals. Many of these are horrible institutions in the way they are expressed, but it doesn't mean we should throw them out, because we need to remember what they were put in place for. And also, when we say a social model, I'm wondering if we say that Black tax, as it is explained, if it's a social model, doesn't that also then imply that we think that within the African nature, there isn't really anything else than to abuse or to take advantage or to squeeze as much as you can out of young people? Now, from understanding of economics, I will claim that African culture, when it is practiced in its original intention, It builds, it empowers, it capacitates, and it sustains an extended family as a foundational building block in African society. And I believe that what we're talking about tonight comes from African culture, although I wouldn't call it black tax, as it were. Hence, the African child is supposed to be protected, supported, and guided to reach her or his potential. This is actually cultural empowerment. And in return, the African child will share, support, and show gratitude for what she or he has been given as a contribution to their cultural, as a form of cultural empowerment in itself. But I also realize that the politics of the Black experience is that we are designed to be servants of an exploitative system, which depends on our disempowerment and will never seek to give us power. As the broken vessels we all represent, our power has to be rebuilt from within. So when as parents we give and receive, and when I say parents, I don't just mean biological parents, I mean as families. And when we also receive from our children, it must be out of the commitment to our collective African power. And when our children receive from and give back to us as parents, elders, and family members, it must be in dedication to the self-determined Africa we all have a stake in rebuilding. I'm not speaking here as a stoic conservative with allegiance to cultural habits that pay us no service. I fully understand how the design of being dehumanized has corrupted our cultural literacy and our values, even within the family, actually, particularly within the family. And that many young people to this day keep being oppressed, taken advantage of, and exploited from the very parents and adults they were supposed to respect and trust. But I am speaking as an African who is a beneficiary and practitioner of Ma'at, the ancient African power concept of truth, balance, order, harmony, law, morality, and justice, which has its counterpart in what we often refer to as Ubuntu. In this world, when I have material gains, it is not necessarily a result of hard work and principled living. It is mostly because of luck, favor, and privilege. When I don't have, it is not because I'm lazy. It is because I live within a system that counts on my dependence and my suffocating normalcy while I attempt to be alive.
1 minute left, Dr. Buntu.
So for me, the conversation is not about outmoding Black tax. It is about refining African cultural values of reciprocity. Of course, in ways that actually builds African self-determination. How do we do that? One, interrogating the harsh realities that are masked behind the buzzword that I feel Black tax has become. And two, designing innovative curriculums for the implementation of cultural learning journeys towards rebuilding the African power family. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Buntu, for sharing your thoughts. Mr. Chipara, you will now have 4 minutes to clarify what you heard from Dr. Buntu. So whenever you're ready, please share your thoughts.
Please unmute.
I believe you're muted, Mr. Chipara. Okay, you're unmuted now.
I think it's the host that has to unmute.
Okay.
Oh, thank you. Now I can unmute myself.
Thank you very much.
Sorry for that slight delay. Right. The one big question that I want to clarify after listening to my fellow debater is to do with how African culture, as much as we grew up sharing as families, either immediate family or extended family, how has the use of money as Africans changed the expectations of those that expect us to give, expect those who are earning money to give? Because yes, in African culture, giving is okay. But from my understanding of the word tax, as I explained earlier on, when it becomes compulsory, when it becomes mandatory, when it becomes an expectation, which expectation does not involve my input? How does that relate? Yes, we are giving Africans, sharing Africans. but how has the use of money affected this so-called black tax? That's my main issue from what I've heard you speak about.
Thank you, Mr. Chipara. Thank you so much. So what I appreciate about this debate is that we have two people who are specialists in their field, and we are looking at black tax as a whole and seeing where we can take both viewpoints and maybe try and find some convergence. So we are right now going to take a 2-minute break for our guest speakers to collect their thoughts and develop personal summations that include both what they came to the table with and an integration of what they heard from each other. While they are doing that, we are going to have someone from our production team put a poll up. Some of you may have answered the question of whether black tax is an outmoded social model or not earlier on social media. And so now we are going to look at those results and see what came of them. So if I can ask someone from our production team to put that poll up for our audience to view. And meanwhile, our speakers will get their thoughts together and develop their personal summations. And while we're waiting for the poll, I'm going to ask you as audience members to also get your thoughts together based on what you've heard for and against the motion, because after we hear the personal summations, we are going to ask you then to vote for or against the motion. So please also get your thoughts together on what you have heard so far. And there we have it. Our poll is up. And it looks like we have 68 responses. 52.9% of people think that no, black tax is not an outdated social model. 47.1% agree that yes, it is. So that was almost an even split. So our guest speakers, you have a little less than 1 minute left. And again, as audience members, please think about what you've heard and think about what your thoughts are, whether they have remained the same, whether they may have changed. And we will ask you to vote again once we hear from our speakers. And our clock is winding down. Mr. Chipara, I'm going to ask you to please get ready. You will be first in your personal summation. So whenever you are ready, you will now have 3 minutes, Mr. Chipara, to share your personal summation based on what you came to the table with, integrated with what you've heard from Dr. Buntu. Please, whenever you're ready, Mr. Chipara, go ahead.
Once again, Madam Moderator, thank you for this opportunity to share my thoughts on this very contentious issue. Right, in summation, after having listened to my colleague here, I'm still of the view that for as long as someone else comes up with an expectation, develops an amount that they want from me, how often they want it or expect it, and if I don't come to the table with the money, then you are faced with all sorts of threats. I'll disown you, you're not a good sibling, and all those things. For as long as that is there, the issue of black tax, as I've known it, as I've seen it around me when I do my seminars on financial wellness, that model is outdated. Being Africans, yes, if the person who is earning money, the breadwinner, as we call him or her, is voluntarily giving the money to those that need some assistance. And when the money is not there, you don't get hounded down by those expecting money for you. Then the model will be okay going forward. But lastly, and most importantly, the issue of assisting those who expect help from us, it has to move away from a giving fish mentality to that mentality of learning how to fish or helping someone learn how to fish, show them how to fish, make sure that they've mastered the art of fishing, and then they graduate from expecting money from me, the person who is doing the giving. If we move to the model where it's a teaching how to fish model as opposed to giving fish model, I'll be okay with black tax. But if it continues as a fish giving exercise without a deadline, without anyone graduating from depending on the giver, then that model, in my view, remains outdated. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chipara. We appreciate that. We are going to ask Dr. Buntu to now share his personal summation. And I would like to say before he begins that we are welcoming comments, questions in our Zoom chat and on Facebook chat. So please, I've seen that people are already adding their comments. Please continue to do so, and we will hopefully get to those. Dr. Buntu, you have 3 minutes now for your personal summation.
Thank you so much to the host and also to Mr. Chipara. No, I think there are many similarities between our standpoints. I also agree that it doesn't make sense when a cultural empower model is exercised in a way that is oppressive and forced, and where it doesn't take you out of the cycles of poverty, because that would be the intention of having members of the family actually going out to be able to fend for all of us. But I think the only point that I want to bring into that is that I don't think we are truthful if we say that this is outdated. It wasn't supposed, because then we assume that it was right in one time. It was never right to make this oppressive and forced and squeeze as much as you can out of anybody. That is not how I see the intention of what we are talking about as black tax in the first place. So I think what I see it as, it's a response. And in the question that Mr. Chipara was raising, I want to just say something about what I think actually is the black tax. I think that what black tax really is black unemployment statistics. It's the unfair wealth distribution that keep ravishing and really dismantling our communities. It's the black abject and generational poverty that we are experiencing. It's the idea of a global village where black people still are the tea girls and the gardening boys. It's the land that black people used to own but can no longer own or struggle with finding the resources to own. It's the black income percentage in comparison to other races. It's what many black women have to do to their skin and their appearance to be seen as presentable in places so that they are recognized as professionals. It's how black men are seen as threats and are expected to not speak their truth. And what happens to us when we go into good education, good jobs, are getting paid good money? It comes as a huge price. And I think that's something we need to discuss much, much more in relation to what black tax. There's a huge cost for being black in this world. And I don't think the perpetrator is the perpetrator of that is the family. I think it's the oppressive societies that families have to navigate within. So for me, in direct response to the question of Chipara is, how did this change? I think when we have lived with patriarchy, when we have lived with capitalism, when we have lived with demonization of our own culture to such an extent that we have started to hating our own and despise our own, something also happens in the mind and in our how we relate to ourselves. We start to learn that you can actually oppress, you can actually force, you can actually squeeze. Capitalism allows us to do that. Patriarchy allows us to do that. So when we then have become so brainwashed into this, it kind of gives that, that's what we keep perpetuating. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Buntu. Thank you to both of our guest speakers. Obviously, a lot of thoughts, and people have thoughts in the chat, and we also have hands raised. So now we are going to ask you as audience members, now that you have heard both sides of the motion, we are going to ask that you once again vote on whether Black tax is an outmoded social model. The links will be put on Zoom, on Facebook. Please vote. We're also going to open this discussion up now to you, the audience. If you are on Zoom and would like to share your voice, please raise a hand and I will call upon you. There will be 90 seconds. You will have 90 seconds to share your voice. So please keep it very focused and very succinct. We're going to ask that you give us your name. Let us know whether you are for or against the motion based upon what you have heard. And if you have a comment or question directed at one of the speakers, please indicate that. Otherwise, please share your comment. So I am going to be calling upon Dominic.
My name is Dominic Muntanga. Thank you very much to my brother Gabs and Dr. Buntu. I think you both shared very interesting ideas about the culture and also about this being burdensome in some way. I've heard both sides, and I think that as a people, as Black people, we need to have a synthesis of both the ideas so that we can get to a point where this becomes a beneficial institution. And to do that, we should be reimagining this Black text based on principle. What's the principle? The principle here is very solid, that I am because we are. And this means that everyone must play a role. But in the current economic system, if we think of this in terms of just money, then we have a problem. But if we think of this in terms of a contribution by everybody in the family to advance our interest at family level, then it means that everybody has to make a contribution, whether it's money from the brother who is in Harare, or it's time that is contributed by the sister or the nephew who is staying with both the parents, Kumusha, and who's not being paid to do that job. So I think that my final analysis would be that no, it's not outmoded, but this must be reimagined. Because if we reimagine, we can then start placing value on everything that matters, including the time that people spend for which they are not paid. And that as a community, we must reimagine this for our best interest, because we are living in the world in a capitalistic society now. And if we practice the culture in its original form, we would be out of line because the world has changed. So we need to take the principle from the old culture and see how can we do it as a community so that we can actually advance our national interest. The interest here is that we want to grow as a family, as a community. And Gabriel is right that it's burdensome. It's burdensome because there's one man carrying the entire family with money. We need to expand the pot of contributors. And the contribution must not just be money, and we must value everybody's contribution. And to make that happen, we have to redefine what we mean by contribution and make sure that when somebody puts money in the pot, that money helps all of us, but that we don't just have takers in the family, people that are just at home, not doing what is supposed to be done to advance the collective. So I think it's outmoded in the sense that it's burdensome and the world has changed, but it's a very good text. We have to reimagine it so that we can exist as a people in this capitalistic world. If we don't reimagine this, we will be dead because we won't be able to bring ourselves together and compete as African people in this very, very difficult society. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dominic, for sharing those thoughts about reimagining Black tax and what that actually looks like. There is another hand raised, Vera Musara. I'm going to ask that you be unmuted so you can also share your thoughts.
Yeah, thank you so much, TK, and thank you, everyone. I'm sorry I joined the discussion a little late, so I'm not sure where you started. I think just a couple of points from my end. Firstly, and I think I largely agree with some of the former speakers. Like TK said, my name is Vera Musara. I work as a governance advisor in the development sector. I'm a lawyer by profession. And personally, I think I'm for Black tax. And I think essentially for three issues, three reasons rather. First is if we look at the social construct of our communities in Africa, we have to look at how that narrative was presented initially, right? And I think one of the previous speakers alluded to that our narrative is wrong and it needs to change. The reason I say that is if we look at roles and responsibilities, men largely were your hunters and gatherers, and the women were your farmers and cultivators. And I think now, because you don't have hunting and gathering anymore, the question is, can men still hunt and gather? No, right? So I think we need to look at our social construct and that narrative and see if it still suits, like the previous speaker said, the emerging roles and responsibilities that we find emanating and coming out within our societies. Secondly, I think it's important for the necessary continual existence and survival of our family structure. If you look at how this has been set up, it parallels, which would be my third point largely, the governance structure within our countries, our economies, and across the continent, right? So if you look at the local governance structure, it looks at having a village assembly or kraal, and the purpose of that is to ensure that they support and some social service system that's set up for villages, for communities. And so I think it's a good model. And I think it's something we need to keep, but the question is that narrative correct? And if it's not, like the previous speaker said, how do we adapt it to one, ensure part of what I think is historical, that narrative has never been correct from a history perspective, and the role of women and gender is not represented as adequately as it should be. And then look at the good things that we had. So what are the best practices we have? And how do we ensure that we continue with those best practices whilst we adapt the narrative as well as try and fit this into our governance structure? So those are my 3 points. Thanks, TK.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Vera. Thank you for sharing that. Lots of food for thought. I'm going to move to some of the comments that have been posted online. We've got TZQ, who says, it's one thing to contribute to the enhancement of your family members and being taken advantage of. I also think the term Black tax is wrong in so many ways. Tsitsi Jukamanja says, I really have an issue with thinking having to assist family is Black tax. Even worse is to think that caring for our parents are a burden. It's the circle of life. Once upon a time, they looked after us, and now that they need looking after, it's called Black tax. And Tapiwa Calvin says, in my opinion, if it's an obligation mandatory and is demanded frequently, such as monthly, it's a tax. If it's voluntary and within one's means, then it is not a tax. I'm going to check and see if anyone else's hand is up. Otherwise, I will read one final comment that has been posted. Wadzanai Mute says, I agree that the term Black tax assumes it's imposed when it is family care and we don't exist in a vacuum. Neither have we succeeded because of our own hard work. People who work in fields work hard, but sometimes don't yield enough due to forces outside of their control. We succeed because of the support we receive from family and well-wishers along our path, so we should help others too. And Tinashe says, Tinashe Nodo, what role do government apathy and societal decay have to play with issues of Black tax? Some of our parents built wealth, which was wiped away as a consequence of political looting. To then say that supporting our parents, family members is a tax is problematic in my view. Everything within reasonable boundaries though. I love the idea of teaching to fish. How though? So this seems to be directed at Mr. Chipara. It's a question that we can all consider. I'm going to ask both of our speakers to please just give some closing thoughts based on some of these comments. Mr. Chipara, how then do we teach someone to fish instead of giving them the fish? What are your suggestions as a financial wellness consultant?
I was actually waiting for that question, Tsitsi. In my line of work, we have found out that a lot of people, and with respect to what Dominic said earlier on, have something in their hand. Even the Bible, I think it's Matthew 25, verse 14 to 30, which talks about talents. Every person has a talent. And when that talent is extracted from them, it doesn't have to involve having gone to college, degree, master's, or PhD. Someone can be taught how to make their own money with either zero or low capital requirements. I remember actually we came up with a list of about 41 ideas that anyone without a degree, without even finishing O levels, can get into and start earning your own money, as opposed to behaving as if because you did not go to college and Gabriel Chipara went to college, therefore Gabriel should look after me. That, in my view, treats those who did not go to school, don't have a day job, as if they are useless people with nothing to add to the family. In fact, that actually tallies in with what Dominic was saying when he said that even someone's time, I may actually say to a person, I've got the capital for us to do a broiler project. You look after the chickens whilst I'm at work, you make sure that they're fed, you make sure that the water is there, and you make sure that they're secure. Come selling of the chickens, we share the money, as opposed to me, who's employed full-time, having to hire someone when you are there at home where the fire run is. So I can imagine if all Africans were to say to ourselves, what's in my hand? What is it that I can do with my hands to earn money, as opposed to only and every time waiting for someone to put something in your hand just by sitting at home and doing nothing? So on the issue of fishing versus being given fish, if anyone is interested, I can talk about that for the whole day. And I won't even have to worry about anyone leaving that seminar without a fishing rod and a fishing pond and fish that they can eat on their own. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chipara. Dr. Buntu, I want to go back to something that you mentioned around this idea of the real Black tax being unemployment, generational poverty. Perhaps we could expand a bit more on those thoughts, just looking at where we, as Blacks in the Black community, where we stand in terms of those things and how Black tax may have actually originated from those things. Would you mind just expanding more on that, please, Dr. Buntu?
Thank you so much. And thank you again to everyone who's contributing very valid and great points to the conversation. I think my view is that it's not just us being greedy people, being exploitative people, being selfish. And I'm not trying to take away human agency from anyone or trying to belittle that also people have a personal responsibility for how they act, especially within the family. But I'm also saying that these are conditions that have been designed into us. We are living a trauma in many ways. If we look at our society, and maybe we should even use the example of what we are seeing happening in South Africa over the last few days, where a lot of people have said that they are going on rampage, they are being ridiculous, they are looting, they are stealing, and they're doing things that don't really address the problem. But I think just saying that is just to looking at the front cover. If we open the book and really look inside why people would go on rampage and loot and do things that to some people who can sit behind safe screens and just comment on Twitter and Facebook, it's also because people are living a trauma that we haven't really crafted a language for. And I think I want to tie that in to say, I completely agree with what Mr. Chipara and others have said about teaching somebody to fish. But I also want to, and this is again not to excuse human agency at all, but when we say that people shouldn't sit at home and do nothing, and again, we are addressing the front cover. I work with a lot of people that I know others would, when they see them or pass them or visit them, say, these people are doing nothing. When I start to work with them, I realize that it's not that they're doing nothing. They are pushed down by oppressive thoughts, by invalidation, by violent experiences, by so many different things. And I also want us to, as we try to solve this problem, link it to the broader problem. We are living within a colonial wound, and we need to repair many things. So I agree when Dominique says we should reimagine, but I would like to call it decolonization at the same time, because reimagine can sound nice and soft and fits very well in plush spaces. But it's much harder than that. It's much more confrontational than that. It is much louder than that. And I think that sits at the root of what I see us solving the problem is as well. We can have dialogues, and we must have dialogues with parents, with family members, so that we better can understand what is actually a collective solution for all and many of our problems, not only the one we are discussing tonight. But I think it sits within a broader context. And sometimes we like to just pick out one problem and discuss that, put it back, and then choose another one. I think there's a broader context of oppression and marginalization that we need to address collectively. And I believe, and I see this in my work every single day, that's possible, that's necessary, and we can and must do it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Buntu. You bring up some very salient points around the fact that there is trauma within our community. Thank you for bringing up what's happening in South Africa currently. You live there, so you are seeing what's happening in real time. So thank you for bringing up that point. So this unrest in South Africa, thank you for bringing that up, and just thinking about how we can actually link that to Black tax. I would like to ask Mr. Chipara if he has any thoughts on that angle, the fact that there is this history of oppression within the Black community. There is a history of trauma. Mr. Chipara, what are your thoughts around that, that angle around Black tax kind of being based in, like, steeped in that oppression? Can you unmute Mr. Chipara, please?
I think the host needs to unmute again.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Now I'm okay. Right. As regards the point that has been brought up, oppression, colonization, and where we have come from as Africans. I'm a student of African history. I did history in high school. I know all about that. But what I'm against is creating a dependency syndrome within a family, within a community, and use the fact that we were colonized before or we were oppressed before as the justification for not allowing someone the opportunity to learn how to fish. Yes, oppression has been there. Oppression is still there. I mean, look at what's happening in South Africa. I mean, the last couple of days. Yes, there are various ways of analyzing what's happening in South Africa, but one of the issues is poverty, unemployment, and the legacy of apartheid in South Africa. But having said that, when do we get to a stage as Africans where we say, hey, we were enslaved, we were colonized, we've been neo-colonized, we've been bombed, we've been whatever you want to put on that list of oppression. When do we get to say to ourselves, we can actually lift ourselves from this bad history by making sure that as we help those that depend on us, we are helping them so that one day they can stand on their own 2 feet. Like I said earlier on, the only exception is the parents. My sibling, yes, I like you, we were born of the same mother, but I am not going to allow any of my siblings or my nieces and nephews to think that Uncle Gabs will look after us until kingdom come. That, when looked at in conjunction with the, the development sector, where, like in my role grown men, able-bodied grown men are now waiting for donations from the US Embassy or whatever NGOs are operating in that area. Now, can you imagine someone I grew up with going to the fields, weeding and putting your cows, so not cows, your ox on the, what you call it, the yoke, is now waiting for a donation. And this guy is my age mate. So what I'm primarily pushing against is using this issue of helping those in my immediate or extended family the point where leaving capacity, God-given capacity to make their own money or create their own way of life without perpetually depending on the person who is perceived to have all the money that's required. I think there's a slight difference there in saying, let's continue giving, without even looking at for how long you're going to give. And then you look at the other side where you say, yeah, I can give you to start your chicken project with 25 birds. But when you sell those birds, you don't spend the money. You move to 40 birds. When you sell those 40 birds, you move to 50. And in 6 months' time, you're on 100 birds. You can imagine 100 birds after 6 months, and you're selling at $6 a bird, that's $600. I can tell you, any African family can survive on $600. So, black tax, as I've defined it, where it's compulsory, come same time in the month, the exact same amount, and there's even someone demanding you to say, hey, we need 50% of your net salary. Now, how is that different from your tithes, the Malachi 3:10? So it's a fine line, like I said. But when you go back to the fact that we've been colonized and everything else, that is, I'm also an African who was colonized or whose parents were colonized. But I've made a conscious decision to move away from this mentality that I need to be given. This gimme, my name is Jimmy mentality needs to move away. We need to move away from it to a point where we then say, hey, I have moved away from a dependency syndrome, and now I'm able to look after my own family and also maybe help someone else to grow from that dependency syndrome. So yes, we acknowledge whatever happened to us as Black people. Remember, my skin is very black. I'm not speaking as a white person. I've experienced all that. But in the same discussion, I'm the same Black person who has said, no more handouts, whether it's from my sibling, whether it's from my father-in-law, God forbid, or from a friend. So that as time goes on, we can all stand in the schoolyard car park and say, hey, I've got my own car. My kids, I'm paying my kids' school fees on time. You don't have to wait on another person to pay your bills. When your hands are okay, your brain is working, you've got eyes. That's precisely why. Okay, anyway, I can talk on this for a long time, clearly. So anyway, thank you very much for that opportunity.
Yes, no, we appreciate that. We just have another hand raised from Tapiwa Matambo. So let's hear what Tapiwa has to say. Tapiwa, you have 90 seconds. Please let us know if you're for or against the motion.
Hi, Madam Host. My name is Tapiwa Matambo.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. I'll try and make it quick. Okay, I'm totally for what Gabs is saying. We need to train our people to be self-sufficient. And I've discovered it over many years that you're always going to have a certain type of brother, cousin, no matter how much you give him to start a project, he is going to blow the money and come back after a month or two and ask for some more money. And I don't know if the best approach is to continue giving him money, because even if you give him money, I mean, he's going to blow it. And I think it comes down to one, if I can call it a business sensibility, which is delayed gratification. We don't know delayed gratification, I think, in Africa. The moment we get a freebie, I think like what's happening in the South African situation, if you listen to a lot of the excuses that are being given there, it's because the government hasn't done enough jobs, this, that, and the other. But if you compare the situation that Zimbabweans have with their economy in Zimbabwe and what the South Africans have in their economy, the South Africans have actually got a much, much better economy, which offers a lot more opportunities than what we have. But they are in a position where they are saying, no, the government needs to do more about jobs and this, that, and the other. And I think that's honestly BS, if I can use that word. We need to train our people to think for themselves, to have the faith that they can do it themselves, and to have the discipline for delayed gratification. You will find that someone whose business is struggling, really struggling, the first thing they think of when they get the first 10,000 US is to buy a car to show that they're doing okay. And I think that mentality needs to go away. So the approach has to be, we have to use the tough stick. People have to be taught to support themselves, to think for themselves, not to rely on others. And maybe it means they may have to go through a bad patch where, you know, tough love of some kind. Because the moment you continue giving them handouts, you're actually going to make it worse for them. And the next thing is they're going to come back with 2 pregnant girls and still expect you to help you look after them. So yeah, I'm totally for the black tax to be removed. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing those thoughts, Tapiwa. We have the results of our final debate poll. I'm going to ask someone from the production team if they would please put those up. So what we have here is that we have 54.9% of people who say that no, black tax is not an outmoded social model, and 45.1% say yes, it is an outmoded social model. So compared to the first poll, still seems that it's kind of 50-50. We are going to begin to wrap up. I would like to summarize what we've heard tonight. There are, again, clearly many thoughts, a lot of emotion around this issue of black tax, even the fact that it's called black tax. Where did it come from? What does it look like? I would like to thank both of our guest speakers. We have Mr. Chipara, who is very much of the mindset that we need to empower ourselves as the Black community and learn how to take care of our financial wellness. So instead of giving and giving and giving, teaching each other, teaching our family members how they too can create some financial wellness. And then we have Dr. Buntu, who introduced us to all of those different civilizations. Thank you for that, Dr. Buntu, and who really talked about the culture that the Black community has been raised in, who talked about the fact that it's a whole system. We, as a Black community, are in a system of oppression. And what does that do in terms of the trauma that we face? And how does that impact how we look at this whole notion of Black tax? So we hope that you are going to walk away from this debate, again, thinking about something you heard in the debate that you can now carry forward with you and put into action. We are asking you to, if you would like to continue with this debate, please go to franklyspeakingzw@gmail.com. Again, that is franklyspeaking, no spaces, ZW, no space, @gmail.com to continue with this discussion. Thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. Thank you for listening in. Again, I'd like to extend a warm thanks to Mr. Gabriel Chipara. Mr. Chipara, thank you so much for your thoughts and for joining us tonight.
The pleasure is all mine, and I enjoyed the discussion. I was getting to a point where I was almost animated, but yeah, you ended the talk in good time.
We welcome animation. Thank you. And of course, Dr. Buntu, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and your views around this whole issue of Black tax.
Thank you very much.
Everyone, please stay safe and stay well and healthy. And please look out for the next episode of Frankly Speaking. Have a good night.